What's up, everyone? This is episode number 373 of WP Watercooler. We're going to be talking about staging sites for WordPress. Go help us out by checking out our sponsor, ServerPress, Maker's Desktop Server. They make local WordPress development easy. Check them out over there. We have a network of shows. Go check out our network of shows over on WPwatercooler.com. We'd appreciate that. And it's talk about appreciation. We also have our Patreon. So go to patreon.com/WPwatercooler. Hit the subscribe button. Click the little bell. That way we'll be notified, or you'll be notified of when we go live, like we did just now.
We're notified.
Wait, pink hearts, orange stars, yellow moons, and green clovers. Those were the 4 Lucky Charms marshmallows when I was a kid.
Heart.
Blue diamonds came along late 70s, early 80s.
Definitely.
Sorry, pre-show is spilling over into the regular show. Sorry.
Something too important to leave behind.
It's the stuff that we talk about during the pre-show. It should be taped.
Say is the one who makes sure that we are always on track to not speaking about the show before the show, so that way when we get in here, we have no idea what we're talking about,
and we have fresh goodness.
We don't even know what the topic is. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about why you should
Lucky
use
Charms.
A staging server.
I can make an analogy between testing on a staging server and Lucky Charms.
Yeah. Please go for it.
I can do that. Well, I mean, you better bet your Lucky Charms that you should be on a staging server. Yeah, did it. There it was.
Stretch, but
I didn't say it was going to be good.
So talking about staging servers, I wanted to kind of I want you to look at your own web host for a minute. Log into your dashboard or whatever. Look at your web host. See if your web host. No. We all use really great.
Oh, I was like,
so
wait.
Everyone else log into their dashboard and look for the word staging server. There has to be staging server, test site. Who knows what stuff people are using, but look and see if something like that exists in your interface there. And if it doesn't
exist on self-hosted website, an EIG hosted nightmare of doom.
I know that I can at least vouch for WP Engine, Nexus, Liquid Web, and Kinsta. They all have staging servers built into their system.
Wait, but those are managed.
Those are managed, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know of a single managed host that does not have a staging server. SiteGround for a minute was like, SiteGround was like, we're a managed WordPress host, and they totally weren't. And now they've even pulled out to the fact that they're like, no, we're not going to even talk to you about WordPress. Did y'all?
Is that how they sounded when they said it?
Well, I think they're like Eastern Europeans.
We're a managed WordPress host.
Me too.
WordPress host. Russian, but it's close.
I think staging sites are important, especially if you have a site that has a lot of traffic going on the site. You have transactions that are happening. There's a number of things that could be happening on this site, and you want to make a change and you want to test the change and make sure it's going to work correctly. It could be a very simple change. It could be something that's super duper difficult that you're going to have to redo this entire page or redo this entire kind of workflow that's going to happen in order to be able to get someone from point A to Z. And that staging site's going to be super important for you because you're going to be able to go through and test to make sure that all this stuff works correctly before you push it out live. As Steve would say, you're not cowboy coding when you're doing that, right?
Yep.
Correct.
I mean, that's not just Steve. He didn't invent the term cowboy coding.
No,
but I borrowed it, but
Steve's the one that I know that says it all the time, so that's why I bring it to him on this.
I do it all the time.
I do too. But let's talk about a very simple version of cowboy coding, right? So a simple version of cowboy coding is
updating your site content.
Well, there's that, but I was just going to say updating your plugins and themes with that button that's very tempting inside of the WordPress dashboard, right? So it's right there. It's in your face. It says you've got something that's outdated. I need to update it.
Not only
just do it.
To do that, it's like press this button. There's nothing that indicates that you should in no way press that button. Like
and on some sites it does it automatically, but make no mistake, it's actually doing a code change, right? There's new code being introduced on your website. And so you want to do that on your staging server first before you do that on production.
And in WordPress 5.5, that caused a ton of problems, especially for folks using Cosper. because it broke a ton of stuff. I think it actually broke a bunch of WooCommerce stuff too, which you can see by the massive tweets that everyone's like, nah! And then everyone's posting in all the Facebook groups, and they're like, "Did you have this problem? Did you like?" It's like you can tell when an update happened.
Yeah.
Well, WooCommerce, the latest WooCommerce update broke a lot of things inside of WooCommerce as well because
WooCommerce.
Well, there was a conflict with the way that WordPress updated jQuery and specifically WooCommerce. So
yeah. I think the dilemma really comes, and Rachelle, since you're an admitted cowboy coder, I'm going to out
this is actually an intervention.
I don't do it all the time. Just a lot.
Just delete the FTP client.
We brought you here today to talk about a problem.
Sorry.
Just kidding. No, but I mean, so I have this conflict, so I just kind of want to commiserate, I guess, which is that it's a lot of work to pull something off. I actually have to do that later today, pull something off of the server and put it at the staging server and do that and then whatever and then push it back. And if there's any content that's added during the thing, you have to merge. So, it is much more of an involved process. And especially for clients that are like, let's keep those hours down, the button becomes even more tempting. And how do you push the button? It'll be fine. It'll be fine. One more time. How do you, as a
like a morphine drip,
press your luck.
Just do one plugin. Just one more plugin.
That's good. It's okay.
How do you make that distinction? Like, how do you be like, okay, this is probably a major update. I got to pull this onto the staging server. Or, a lot of times I read the change log and they're like, fixed the Italian translation of this thing in the update. And I'm like, we're good. How do you make that distinction yourself? I'm curious.
I kind of take it on a site-by-site basis and past performance. There's a lot of sites that I've built, like I built it from scratch. There's barely any plugins on it. It's probably going to be okay. I've never had a problem with it in the past. I will take that chance. There's a lot of sites where I inherited it from somebody else. It has a bunch of weird theme forest plugins that are janky that I need to go out and get and pull down because they don't have the license set up right. Or those, I am never going to push that button. I will always clone it to staging. I think
janky theme forest theme is redundant, by the way.
No, I've used a couple that are okay, but I mean, in general, like those plugins are. Especially anything with WooCommerce. Oh my God, Theme Forest WooCommerce plugins make me want to cry. Why did you do this? Yeah, don't do it.
Don't do it.
They're not all bad. I don't want to be like that, but I mean, I've had more bad experiences than good ones. So
I'll be like that. They're all bad.
Yeah, I was like that. We got no problem being like that. We'll talk about it.
You said a couple things that I want to highlight, though, right? One of the things you said is the change log, right? So not all developers are created equally, but the better developers that are out there will actually release a change log to let you know what changed in the version that you're updating, right? It's easy.
I judge people so hard on their change logs. It's like, I'm like, how much information is in here? Is there a line? Like, I want details.
But you need those details so that you can make a determination whether or not it feels safe to do this, to make this update, right? And those change logs are critical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right? I'm kind of obsessive about the change logs, actually.
The other thing you talked about, and I want to highlight this one, is the copying from live to staging and back, right?
Yeah,
it's the and back part that I take issue with, right? So I actually, in none of our sites where we're using a staging server will I ever copy back from staging to live. I don't mind making an instance from live to staging just to do testing, but I'm assuming that changes are happening in live, and if I copy back from staging, I'm going to now overwrite those changes that happened during that gap. And
so you're just testing.
We're only using it for testing, yes.
And then you go and cowboy code. So you are a safe cowboy coder.
Yeah, he loads up his FTP client, he highlights
them
all, he drags it across and drops it, and it just updates.
FTP? No, man. I'm just doing it in VI, right on the server, right on production.
Oh, God.
No.
You're like in the SQL, in the MySQL database. Oh, I don't do that. Don't do
Join
that.
this thing.
Sometimes you've got to merge stuff. I don't know.
We actually roll out all of our code through Git and through a deployment system, so we're covered there. We don't do anything through FTP. But again, I don't like copying an entire staging server into live because you really truly are copying the entire server. So you're copying everything. You're copying code, database, images. You literally are copying the entire instance.
Talking about this, like this is I always get anxious when I do this in like on sites, and it's like literally making my hands hurt right now, like it does when I do it. I hate that feeling. Ugh.
So yeah, at least part of our policy is we'll never go staging back to live or do any sort of copy into live.
So when do you put your stuff in Git? Is your Git automatic based off of your live production site then? Like, so if you make changes in that, or how does that flow work?
Yeah,
walk us through your flow, Steve.
Yeah,
I believe I've attended a talk on that flow.
Yeah.
I like it.
I mean, most of our stuff we're either testing and staging or really testing locally first, right? And so we do all of our testing locally, and then we'll push through Get to staging or dev, where we haven't really talked about a dev server.
Right, I wanted to talk about that too.
Yeah, so we'll have a staging server, a dev server, and when we know it's tested and ready to go, at that point we'll do a manual push out to live.
Right.
We have
a manual push to live. That's what I was talking about in terms of putting it back, as opposed to going into the live server. So okay, so you don't like just test it on your staging local. I'm using them kind of interchangeably at the moment, but like go there, push the button and be like, okay, everything's cool, and then log in to the live server and then hit the same button.
Now, I'm specifically talking about code changes. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about content changes. Those are different, right? And so a lot of people use staging server to literally stage their content.
Oh, I'm talking about I'm saying a plugin.
Okay. So a plugin, again, it goes through the process I just described, right? So we don't use staging to push code over to live.
So you do it live on the production server. So, say you have to update gravity forms, you test it on your local or staging. Mm-hmm. It's great. It's fine. Everything works. Then you log in to your live and hit the button.
So we use GitHub for storing our code, and we use a continuous deployment system called Buddyworks, right? And so Buddyworks is the system that actually handles the push itself. And the reason we like Buddyworks, what's that?
A different one before, weren't you?
Yeah, it was called.
Which is all the time.
Yeah, it was. We've been on Buddyworks for a while now, but there was one before that. But Buddyworks is essentially a continuous deployment system, and what it gives us is the ability to roll back. So if we push some code and things just didn't go as expected, we have an undo button inside of Buddyworks.
So you put the fresh code on your GitHub, and then it automatically updates it.
Yes, and we also use a package manager called Composer. So a lot of our plugins aren't even in the code itself. It's just calling a reference to an external source that's pulling in the code. And we do that so that we're actually not storing. We store as little code as possible in the GitHub repo, so that we're not making changes to the core code itself.
So you're just a bunch of references. You're like a man in a suit that's just a chair, and then
don't be the person that puts plugins in your repo.
I'm the guy behind the guy.
Yeah, there's like a guy with a hat and a jacket, and you open it like, no, there's no one there, and it's just
it's like blacklists. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just a bunch of hollow shells saying, "Look over there."
Because of the fact that we're not recording our dev branch show and we are recording just Watercooler itself, I wanted to bring us back just a teeny bit. Might be a lot of it. Might be like we're back now into our solar system. So with having
we launch into outer space, did we miss a strata?
We did. Yeah.
So with a staging server, just a staging server you could spend $20 a month on web hosting and get a staging server. Like there are web hosts that have staging server pieces out there. By having one of those staging servers, you can hit the button that says like Steve was saying, take the content that's on the live website and put it onto staging. They typically give you like a special URL that you can go to. It could be like staging.your website. It could be, there's a whole bunch of different ways. You get to the staging site, and essentially it's a snapshot of your existing website in the staging environment, running typically on the same server. Could be on different servers depending on how this place is set up. But now you're on that server. Now you can play with it and kind of work on that site, see how it's going to work, and do all the things that you want to do with it. What Steve was saying with taking that existing site and pushing it back to live, you know, there's a couple ways to do it, and there's some ways where if you do it, you may be overriding everything that's on the site. So for instance, like a WooCommerce site, you probably don't want to just like blindly push everything because you're going to lose all your transactional data. I mean, Cosper's head just going like, no, don't do that.
You're going to lose the transactions that happened in between the time you copied the site and that you pushed the site. But there's also like WP Engine has a when you push, you can select which things you want to push back. So if you haven't changed anything in WooCommerce, but you've moved, you know, change some other plugin, your Gravity Forms again, I keep using that as an example, then you could push back and exclude all of your you know, transactions and basically not overwrite that component. So there is a way to do that without overriding the entire thing, depending on your host and their tools. It's all about the tools.
Yeah, like one of our sponsors, ServerPress, they make a product called WPsitesync, and WPsitesync could do that. Like, you know, they've been sponsoring us for years, but for me, I really wanted to have a good site to do this on. And most recent, I think it was like 3 or 4 months ago, I had to go and take a bunch of Beaver Builder built pages that I created and move just those pages over, but not touch anything else, because the site had a lot of comments on it and it had a lot of transactional data that was on it. But I still wanted to get just like that look and feel to show up on the new website. And using a tool like that works pretty well to be able to just kind of push just the pieces that you want over.
Yeah, WPsitesync is great because it lets you get granular, right? You can say I just want to make a copy of this particular post or this page or this thing, and then copy it back over when you're done, right? There's a caveat, right? WPsitesync is great. It's one of the best tools out there for doing this kind of thing. There are a few other tools like it, but if you're using, now I'm going to sound like I'm bashing, but I'm about to. If you're using Elementor, none of these tools are compatible with Elementor.
Oh,
what's that?
And the reason is because it's the way it saves its posts, right? So the save itself in Elementor is actually talking. It's not following a WordPress best practice, so it can't do a revision or an instance.
Oh wow.
Because of the interface. It's the Elementor interface that's
See, that was the problem I used to have. Well, I still kind of have it, but I use the database differently now. But like I used to have that problem with ACF because of the way that they store the data in the database is not the same as if you just put it in, you know, the post field or whatever.
Right.
So it's not the same structure of data at all.
I mention it because you know, these things aren't going to be compatible with everything that you're using. You need to keep that in mind, right? There's another plugin that's kind of similar to WPsitesync called Revisionize. Actually, it's now called Revisions Pro, I think. There's a few that are like it, but Revisionize is not going from server to server. It's on the same server where you can basically make an instance of a post using the revisions part of WordPress, where you can make your changes while the post is still live and then merge it back in when you're done. But again, cool. Again, it's not compatible with all things.
So is that good for something like if you were using blocks in a post and you wanted to have like all the goofy blocks all kind of work correctly and it's all going to just show up right? Would you use it for that?
Yes. Again, with the caveat that not all blocks are compatible, or not all these plugins are compatible with all things. So there's some custom blocks that are out there that you may use that just may not work because of the way they store their data, right? WPsitesync and Revisionize and all these things are kind of meant to work with WordPress best practices, right? So it's working within posts and post meta and things like that. If things are stored outside of that normal database structure, then it's not going to be compatible.
WP Stagecoach is another one that I've used. Someone asked about free. They used to have a free tier. I don't know if they did or if they still do. I haven't used them in a while, but they actually copy your site to their server and spin up an instance of that site on their server, so it's not on your servers. And they basically also say they do not overwrite the content again. So that's part of their whole marketing. They're like, we're the only ones like on their main page, but basically that they're not taking the entire database. So that's one that I've used. Have not used them in a couple of years because mostly everything I'm on now has their own staging server. So all the things I used to use it when my clients weren't on staging servers and weren't on managed hosting, but now I basically move everyone to managed hosting because you don't want to have 1,000 backup plugins. I'm tired of all the backup plugins. I just want the backups to be baked in.
So I've had a few friends over the past several years who they don't want to. They have let's say Jason's favorite example, a cat blog, and they don't want to kind of spring for managed hosting or anything like that. Something that I helped a friend do when they wanted to redesign their site was we used actually Blog Vault's migration plugin, Migrate Guru.
Yeah.
And then they had hosting that was fortunate enough to have multiple sites that they could host. So you don't necessarily have to have staging. We just spun up a second site, used Migrate Guru to shove their site onto that second site. They rebuilt the site. Fortunately, there weren't a lot of comments or anything like that coming in. We didn't have to worry about sync issues, but you can kind of do this at every level of how you're hosting your site, be it a large corporate entity site down to the cat blog.
There's always some solution.
And speaking of our sponsor, you can also use ServerPress for this, right? So use ServerPress to bring the site down locally, right? You don't even need to pay for another web server to have this. So you can use ServerPress to migrate between your remote site and your local site. Just run a local site and make all your changes there and use your local machine as your staging server.
Yeah. Which actually, it does protect you from a lot of the potential issues that can arise with having a live, like when you have a site set up that's an actual site that's not necessarily in a staging server environment that's password protected or whatever. It does help to just pull it off locally instead of just spinning it up and hoping it's never indexed.
And you bring up another really good point about password protection, right? Yeah. So WP Engine, some of the other hosts, if you make a staging site, I think it automatically adds password protection, or you should
turn it on. Mm-hmm.
Don't turn it off. And the reason is if you have a staging site that's out there that's not password protected, it's open to the public, Google will start indexing it.
It'll get found somehow.
Yeah, somehow. And then you'll go like beta.whatever, and you're like, what is this? Why is this showing up in the
you don't want that.
Results? Yeah, I have a client whose previous web developer never took their code down from their dev servers, and they're still findable on Google. I mean, this is that site that I talk about that was built in like a giant trash pile forever. I talk about it like constantly, but you can still go find them. It's like, what are you even doing? But these are the same people who didn't turn off the please block the search engines button when they launched the site. So
that works.
Or janky migrations where they didn't change the URL and all the URLs on the site are still pointing back to the staging site anyway.
or the elements are in there. There's so many things that can actually, you really do need a good staging process and a good staging tool to do that, because back in the day when I first started, you had to do that. You had to manually change those things. You had to make sure everything, you had to rechange your install.
SQL queries, find and replace.
Right. Oh, those were the days.
I did want to bring up one of the other advantages of using a staging server, especially one that's built correctly, is the fact that typically those staging servers have caching disabled. So that makes it so that when you're going through and testing stuff and you're hitting refresh and refresh and refresh, or you have some type of auto refresher or whatever, you can use that to determine, is it this, is cache screwing me over? Is it the actual
server caching, object caching, DNS caching?
Yeah, you have a whole stack of caching. Yeah. But then
DNS caching is the worst.
And to put the developer hat back on again regarding one of the things Steve said was a testing server. So the testing server may or may not have caching enabled. And that caching could also be used for essentially like running load tests on that. So if you wanted to spin up 10,000 people hitting that server all at the same time, you could definitely do that too. And it's running the same environment and it's running the same caching. It's just essentially a copy of production.
Yeah, WP Engine has those 3 servers, staging servers now. They've got development, staging, and live. So it's kind of got the 3. It gets to be a little rough if you're a small shop.
I think you get 6 because each of those 3 servers has legacy staging.
Oh yeah.
Well,
so you can have a lot of fun.
6 servers with every install.
You could really screw yourself over and get confused.
I think we touched on this a couple of weeks ago,
I think, or maybe it was Twitter. I don't remember. But one of the main things that always frustrates me with, and I think they're handling this. This is a ticket that's happening in the next 5.6, I think, is that, or maybe it already happened in 5.5. Is that the staging server will have a dashboard, will have a different look than the dashboard of the live server. Does everyone else
color? WordPress?
This is what John Brown submitted years ago, and it's so cool that it's actually showing up now.
Actually, so I think Nexus just turned this on in their environment. So they actually put a little flag right at the top of the toolbar. That
it's a staging server.
Production.
I've made little JavaScript gadgets for that because I have done that.
One of the things that we do, a habit that we've always done, is actually change the look of the environment. So what is it called? The profile.
Yeah, I always go the red one.
Yeah, you go into your color, your admin color scheme. So I highly recommend
Will Robinson.
Change your admin color scheme on staging to a color that is staging versus production, so that you can clearly identify where you're at.
Every time. But I do think they're implementing an automatic fix this, and there was some discussion about, are you going to be able to choose the look of the staging server vibe to know that it is, or are they just going to make it blanket? I think that was the discussion. People are like, I want to be able to make it red or purple or whatever, as opposed to just like your staging server is always red or whatever it is. There's some discussion somewhere happening about that I cannot remember where it is. Super useful. I'm here for you guys.
Well, look, most other development tools have this already, right? So if I don't know if you use Table Plus or anything for database development, but Table Plus, you just have a little flag where you choose staging or production or dev, and they've got a whole bunch, and they're configurable as well. So you know right away which database you're looking at.
So you can have a little cat blog flag.
It tends to be important to know which database you're talking to.
Yeah.
You don't want to go and wipe out production.
Oh no! Just drop all the tables. It's all good.
Oops.
Awesome.
No, we didn't. I'm just over here, just making comments. Don't mind me.
We haven't minded you for a long time.
I know.
So we're good.
I feel so loved and safe space.
You need it. Well, we still have a couple minutes here, or a couple of seconds here. You need to switch over to anime face.
Yeah.
No, I'll be anime in another video. Maybe next week we could all be anime. Today I'm a tropical princess. Today.
Oh man, good stuff. Well, hey, let's end on a good note here. How about that? Thank you all for coming and hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you for all the folks that were in the chat room, asking questions.
Don't be a cowboy.
JD was saying that he didn't like Elementor, and he was saying that there's a product called MigrateDB Pro. There's folks are asking questions and putting stuff in the comments, and as well as the chat that are on the different places that we stream this to. So thank you very much for that. Here is
thanks for interacting.
Outro. Go to patreon.com/WPwatercooler to sponsor us over on Patreon. We'd really appreciate that. There's the fine folks that helped us out over there. Thank you very much. Hit hit the little subscribe button and click the bell so you'll be notified just like you were this time. I think it'd be great for you to be notified when we go live. And lastly, we do a couple shows here on WPwatercooler Network. Earlier today, we did our Smart Marketing show. Feel free to go take a look at that. And if you just want to listen to us instead of actually watching us, you can do that too. You can go click on any of the different subscription places over on WPwatercooler.com/subscribe. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.